Did I see this coming? To be honest, the indie scene has been putting out some bangers over the past 5 years. To some, they're the one bright spot of modern gaming. And while I'm not of the same mind of doom and gloom, I do agree that the indie scene is a big player nowadays. Blink and you could easily miss a gem. And today, I'm sharing a gem with you. It's a turn-based RPG from something classic called Quartet. It comes from the same minds as those who gave us Shadows of Adam, which was a good game. A solid 7 out of 10 to me and well worth the cheap asking price. But the thing is, I wasn't really keeping my eye on Quartet. I had a few friends who were, but I wasn't one of them. I put out a video recently listing a handful of RPGs that I'm still looking forward to this year, and Quartet didn't make that list. I knew of it, and that it was coming out relatively soon, but the trailers didn't really grab me. I attribute that once again to myself not being too connected to older games. Still, I was open to giving it a go in my own time once it released, or alternatively, if I was lucky to get the game early, then I'd be happy to give it a whirl in between my other games. Well, the latter happened. Something Classic reached out to me directly and offered me a PC code, so thank you to them for providing it. Though simply providing early access doesn't guarantee my praise. I've made that very clear with games like Reignatus and Neptunia Sisters vs Sisters. If the game doesn't stand on its own merit, then I'll make my opinions clear on it. That has always been my prerogative, and I won't dilute that opinion even if someone is doing me a favour. So when I say to you that Quartet is one of the best turn-based RPGs of 2025, it's releasing on August the 26th by the way, I am not saying that lightly. This game is fantastic. If I were to apply a number, I'd say an 8.5, bordering on a 9 out of 10. As soon as I started playing this, I set everything else aside because I was having that much fun with Quartet. It took me 20 hours to finish, which included a fair chunk of the side content, and the PC port, while limited in options, was stable. Not one crashed during my playthrough, so technically it's sound. Now if you choose to check it out for yourself, what will you be met with? The game begins atop a mountain, presumably many years in the past. 4 heroes are fighting against a mysterious enemy, and the conclusion of this fight leads to a time skip where you get a choice of what character you want to begin your journey with. So initially, it's quite easy to make the obvious comparison with Quartet, a turn-based RPG with multiple protagonists, and no less you get a choice of which one you want to use. Seems kind of like Octopath Traveler in that regard. Each character has a specific story tied to them, and there's an overarching plot that brings them all together. However, once you've done the first segment for each character, it swiftly converges into one linear storyline until the final stretches of the main quest. Once that final dungeon opens up, pretty much signalling the nearing end of the game, it will start to branch out again and offers a wide array of optional content, like the conclusions of the character side stories and some optional dungeons. In short, if you're worried that the game is too linear for a fair chunk of time, don't worry, because by the end it starts to open up again, and that optional content, specifically the character side stories which are definitely worth doing, will add a good 6 to 8 hours on top of your playtime. The characters themselves I think are well handled too. Each of them gets plenty of opportunity to shine, in many cases they will be left to their own solo sections at points, and the dialogue is good. It presents a diverse group of characters with their own defining characteristics. Ben, for example, is a bit of a joker with a strong moral compass, while Alexandra is an introverted girl working to one day be reunited with her comatose mother. No doubt the characters are good in Quartet, like they certainly range in quality, but they're all decent at least. And one thing I do like is that they interact well together. It's clear that Something Classic wanted to ensure that Quartet didn't fall into the same problem that the original Octopath Traveler did, which is where despite having 8 different protagonists, it didn't feel like they had a reason to travel together. I'm happy to say that Quartet didn't suffer from that same problem. As for the overarching story, it's pretty good. I won't go too in depth because like most stories it's better experience spoiler free, but I was satisfied with it. There's a good build up, I like the premise of the story, how it all connects, and it comes to a conclusion that I personally was happy with. At the end of the day, the quality of said story is going to come down to individual opinion, but I think Quartet has done well with both the narrative and its collection of characters. But what about the combat? Don't worry, we're jumping to that now. Now, like I said before, Quartet is a turn-based RPG. You get 4 characters on the front and 4 characters in reserve that you can freely switch between. If the story and characters were good, then the combat is even better. All of the fundamentals of what makes a great turn-based RPG are there, and Quartet makes it a fun experience throughout. You have a timeline that shows turn order, which you can naturally manipulate. Each character fulfills a certain role in the group, from mage to healer, and even niche support roles. You've got elemental weaknesses, good progression tied to equipment management, and new skills that are learnt through leveling up. And it remains challenging right to the very end. The early stages aren't too bad in terms of difficulty, but there's no doubt that around the midpoint it started to become more difficult. And what really struck me with Quartet is, despite mine getting to max level, which is level 50 in this game, and doing all of the side content I could find before taking on the final main story boss, it was still fairly difficult. Even with all of my abilities, some of the best gear in the game, it still required optimal strategy. Now, just like Shadows of Adam, every character has a gauge tied to ability points, which is represented not by a solid number but by a percentage, and each ability will drain that resource in percentiles. So for instance, a group-based heal will lower the gauge by 30% and so on. Every turn though, will see that gauge replenish by a set amount, which is generally a 10% recovery rate at first, but it can be boosted by equipping certain accessories or using the character's guard ability to double the recovery rate for that turn. Success in combat mostly comes down to managing this resource, as in many cases the later bosses will hit so hard that you don't really have the luxury of freely using items. Instead, you can switch characters out frequently and they will gradually restore that AP while in reserve, so there's a good balance that has to be struck while actively in combat. No doubt though, what really stood out to me with this gameplay is how well the different characters mix together. As I've said previously, each character has a specific role to play and will often have their own unique perks that they bring to the team. Ben, for example, is not only a healer and wind-based damage dealer, but he also has useful abilities like a move that allows a character to use an ability twice in a row. Combine that with someone like Cordelia, who later on gets some extremely powerful spells, buff her magic damage up and lower the magic defense of the enemy, and you can effectively one-shot some of the later bosses if you get the setup right. That's by no means the only option available to you, I'm barely scratching the surface, but Quartet prides itself on providing a wide array of choices to the player at any given time, and that only enriches further if you did partake in the optional content. Once again, most of that opens up right near the end of the story, though it's not entirely linear up to that point. Most of the game proceeds in chapters, which will fly by quite quickly, it has to be said, but there are a couple of extra areas you can check out even while progressing that main story, often rewarding you with equipment or some additional enemies to level up some more. This was made better because the game has no random encounters. While I can tolerate a game that has them, I much prefer it when an RPG doesn't, so that's a thumbs up from me. And finally, I mostly like the OST. There are some exceptions to that. There was a particular jazzy battle theme which I felt didn't match the mood of what was happening in the story at that point, but it's mostly decent. Not the best I've ever heard as a collective, but not something I'd want to mute either. And reading over my notes, that's all I want to say on Quartet, because if I say more, it might start to encroach to spoiler territory, which is not what I want to do. In short though, Quartet surprised me. Like, I expected it to be good, maybe a 7 out of 10, much like Shadows of Adam was, which was why I wasn't overly excited for it and was happy to check it out after playing other games in my backlog, but after trying it out myself and absolutely loving it, all I can do is praise the developers. Like I say, for me, Quartet is one of the best turn-based RPGs of the year. Brilliant gameplay, it's well paced, it combines linear storytelling and optional content well, there's very little bloat in the runtime, and most importantly, it's fun. It's a fun game, one that I couldn't pull myself away from until I saw the credits roll. And as such, I have no issue recommending this game to any fan of turn-based RPGs. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please like and subscribe for more JRPG content, and consider joining my Patreon if you're interested. Peace.